Do you want to learn more about how to improve your orgasmic capacity, how to better communicate with your partner, and really how to get the motor going on your libido? Well, look no further, because in this interview with Dr. Uchenna Ossai, we cover all that and more. Hi, my name is Dr. Laura, and on this channel, I help you gain optimal health through knowledge and movement.
Hello. Yeah, I still can't see myself, but it's okay.
Shoot. Well, you are in frame.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure of that. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you okay.
Okay. If it's echoey, just let me know. And I can put headphones in.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today for this amazing interview live. It was such a pleasure having you on the Tuesday Takeover. I know much, and I got such an overwhelming and amazing response from the content that you shared.
Oh, thank you. I'm really glad that it was helpful and, good for people to hear what I had to say about sexy time and the body and all of the things, because that's what we want. Yes.
So now I have been a fan of you for several years. I've been stalking you.
What?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So for my own personal, actually your website and many of the things that I've done on Instagram and on the site were inspirations for what I for my own social media presence. So it's really fun. I'm for a moment getting to you in person.
Oh my God. First of all, I'm very humbled and very grateful to you, and I'm so glad that it supported you in some way. That's the whole point, is that we have to kind of support each other. And I think what's crazy is that I was having a conversation with my sister today about how crazy busy things are getting, ironically, in this COVID time.
Yeah.
And I'm just surprised at how much busier I've gotten. And I think also I'm very, very lucky, and very, very, very lucky human in that I'm still employed, and I, at least for the time being. And so, it's really, really challenging for a lot of people to kind of be present in their bodies and in their spaces. And, so I'm just really grateful that, this serves as a source of support for people, but as well as inspiration and guidance and whatever that may be. So thank you.
Yeah. So, I've been kind of I would love for you, and I know you did the takeover, well, a brief background. I would say a lot of cool things to a very unique provider and person in the space.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, definitely, I've taken a unique route. So the reason why I became a pelvic PT, or PT period, was to do pelvic health. And so I interestingly enough, I applied to PT school, and I eventually got into University of Illinois, Chicago. And then when I was there, I thought to myself, I really want to be well-rounded, but I didn't know what that looked like, because I was a newbie. I was green, and so I went to, luckily in Chicago, and I don't know if anyone watching is in Chicago. Chicago is such a hotbed of just, a lot of research and healthcare and everything. And so I went to a lot of community talks and learned about, public health and what that did and everything. So while I was in PT school, I became part of the Urban Allied Health Academy at University of Illinois. And it was multidisciplinary. So I worked with a bunch of students in different disciplines. And we really focused on healthcare disparities.
Oh, wow.
And then I decided to do a fellowship called the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship, and it can be, again, multidisciplinary, where you get didactic learning on how to create public health interventions for the community, how to improve the health of the community, how to do needs assessments, how to design. So that's when I learned about transgender health, because my focus was on homeless youth. And so I worked with a lot of genderqueer, trans youth who were homeless. And so that's where it catapulted my career. And I kind of just started going down that path where it was just very much, when I talk about sexual health, when I talk about, physical therapy, any of that, I always kind of have to think of it from an intersectional framework. And so after practicing for 4 years, I decided, my patients have sexual issues. And even though I did a residency in women's health, I did a residency at Washington University. Even though I did all this training, I still I didn't know, right? And I was always interested in talking about sex, but I didn't have the true training for it. And I felt like if I talk about sex, I want people to feel comfortable with me, to know that I went through a training process and that this was coming from, evidence-based stuff. And I think there was also a cultural component to it, because I think I wanted to legitimize talking about sex. And I felt it would make people more comfortable. And honestly, it made me feel more comfortable. And so I did the University of Michigan program. And so now I'm faculty on their program, and I teach the biopsychosocial component for sexual health. And I'm assistant professor at University of Texas Dell Medical School, and I'm pelvic PT. And then I started UC Logic. So I'm literally crazy busy, but I love it.
Yes. So for people who are tuning in now, UC Logic is a platform. Bourbon Tales, which I absolutely love, and it's so great because you answer some of these questions, and I don't raise taboo topics, but they are obviously relate to people in all realms. Sometimes, even when people say, "Oh, urinary incontinence," this is, it's common, but it's not normal. We can't shame around this stuff. And so sometimes I kind of struggle with that statement. But anywho, I love how on your you really talk about just some of these sexual health questions that come in. Such honesty. You just don't make it ever shameful or dirty or sensualized or sexualized. It's just very informative, and I really, really, really like it. And follow. I highly recommend it. It's a really great source of information.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I mean, I think for me, just when I started UC Logic, the whole goal was, to not have a judgmental framework. I mean, granted, we all have our judgment, but I wanted it to be shame-free. I wanted it to be honest, evidence-based, but also kind. I think that sometimes people have these questions, and even, I'm not going to lie, sometimes the questions activate me and I get a little mad. I'm like, oh, but at the same time, it also has to come, then we have to back up, and then we have to be compassionate with how we answer and how we look at this, because we have to understand that there are always two or more people involved, and people coming in from different understandings about their body and their sexuality. So that's what I really love about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the question that people are direct messaging you, or
I get emails, I get DMs, some of my friends text me. So, I mean, what I end up doing, because I do get people from all walks of life, so all races, ethnicities, genders, I try to mix it up to maintain their confidentiality, because some of the questions can be really specific to depending on who's watching. So I try to change. I mess with the age, but all of that is like the age that I get are reflective of my audience, but I just make sure that I try to protect everyone as much as possible.
That's
so.
Really and what would you say as someone who, and this might be a hard question, just like sexual health related, what's some of like most common or in like something that people always asking?
People always ask me about orgasms. They always ask me about that. That's really common. I get a lot of questions about libido from partners and from the person who's deemed to have a low libido. And I put low libido in parentheses there on purpose. I get asked a lot of questions about really honestly like shame or questions that are rooted in shame, if that makes sense. So people ask me, about their labias, or they ask me about like genital body image is a big thing. And also postpartum sex. I get some questions about postpartum sex. When is it too soon? I really don't want to have sex ever again type of questions. How do I navigate this with my partner? So I get that a lot as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that, so Rochester, Minnesota. So I like to just say that as a caveat. Many of the individuals that are coming to me are in opposite sex relationships, but everyone, and a lot of times they libido discrepancy, and there can be such shame and such frustration and like a lack of understanding and a lot of pain that comes up with that, because they want to be with their partner that way, but they may express that, hey, it's not like when we were 21 or whatever that was, or it wasn't like when we were newlyweds and we didn't have any kids, or 3 kids in and they've got a ton of stuff going on and they're home learning. I think it's so interesting to me how people sometimes can't see how things transition. One of the is like when you used to exercise for 8 years, the same as how you exercise or move now, and then or whatever age they are, like that your books you were reading or the music you were into, is that the same thing now? And everyone's like, well, no, or has your personal clothing style changed? Well, yeah, of course it's changed. Okay, well, that's the same thing with sex, that.
I agree. I think that like what's interesting about libido is that, particularly when you're talking about like cisgender couples, heterosexual cisgender couples, it's really the burden is put on the woman, right? And I say this many times. I've written about this and I've talked about this, but I never get tired of saying that it's this concept that, women, this particularly sexual shaming for women is so like hardwired in all of our DNAs, no matter what your belief is, because it's a cultural, societal thing worldwide, right? And so even if you're like woke and like the most sex educated forward person ever, there can be a lot of shame held, and kind of saying, oh, I don't have the same libido I used to. And it's so interesting because I think the default is always either like, quote, the dominant partner or the male partner. And that isn't always accurate, right? I think that I always tell my patients and clients that their partner's libido is not the standard in which you need to measure yourself against. It's really about what is it that you had in that time where your libido was ideal, and what was happening. Was it novel, right? Did you have less in your life? Did you have children? Did you not have children? Right? Were you happy emotionally, psychologically? Was it a different space for you? And what is the situation now? And the thing is, people say, well, it wasn't bad. It's not bad now. And I'm like, I'm not saying it's bad now, but I'm saying it's different now, right? It's different. Your bandwidth is different. What you respond to emotionally is different. Right. And I mean, what felt good to us, like I said in the stories before, 10 years ago or 10 minutes, even 10 months ago, may not feel the same now.
Right.
Right. And one of the studies by the Kinsey Institute found that during COVID, people's fantasies have transitioned more into the romance, passion fantasies versus anything else, because people are craving intimacy and closeness and lovey and all of those things. And so I tell people this, because this study just came out. And so I want to share that, because this is a time where you might be needing different things. So you're going to respond sexually to different things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And even though you have your same spot that you like to be hit every time, it may not be like, even though they're hitting it right, you may not be responding to it, because you might actually be craving something else. And whether or not you're aware of that. And so the libido conversation is always so rich, because it's so highly individualized, it's so specific. So I love when I get those questions, because it's so common, particularly among women and vagina owners. So,
yes. And so this is something that I have sort of become slightly fascinated. I'm sure that you see this in your demographic Instagram, but I have quite a few younger followers who are, at 24 range, even younger, and I have a real passion for helping those girls, because I know how I learned a lot about my sexual health was like, thank goodness I just found a good group of girlfriends, and we were able to talk it out, and we were able to share information. It was sort of this collective circle sharing. But when I think about like who are in the 24 range, they don't have a lot of knowledge. And so, and it's still affected by libido. A lot of times we think it's like a menopause issue, but it's not. And so I'm interested to hear, like, how do you kind of tap into that, or how do you start that conversation? Because I don't think about it necessarily a libido issue.
Yes. So here's the thing. One of the things that I always talk to with, especially my patients who are in late, like high teens, like 19, 20, early 20s, where, they're still in college, grad school. I always say, when did you ever, like I said, what is your value around sex?
Yeah.
They're like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you like sex? Is it fun? Do you enjoy it? What about it do you like? What is it that is really really brings you out? And a lot of them don't think about sex that way.
Yes.
Right? They don't think about sex as, oh, this is something that's like, I can have sex with someone for my pleasure, or I can have sex with someone for, they say, and sometimes, you get the opposite, where someone might say, I own my sexuality. I can have the sex that I want. I'm like, great. How do you access your pleasure? Mm-hmm. And then it's like, oh, and there's a great book written by Peggy Orenstein. It's called Girls and Sex.
Yeah.
And she investigates this, right? And she talks about this very core issue. When we talk about sex, we rarely talk about pleasure. And I think the concept of pleasure is my colleague, Elisa Bokine, she's co-founder of Melanin and Mental Health. And she said to me many moons ago, we went to the Michigan program together. She said, pleasure is your birthright. And I loved her saying that, because it's so true and right, but no one teaches us how to access that, giving yourself permission. And I don't tell people how to give themselves permission, but I start the question, right? I start asking and pulling out and saying, gosh, if you could design an ideal sexual encounter that was just the only person giving input was you, what would it look like? And I don't tell them to answer it right then, but I tell them, start thinking about it like that.
Yeah.
What is that ideal sexual encounter today in this context, where you are in life, and know that ideal sexual encounter will evolve as life evolves for you, as things happen to you, wonderful things, not so wonderful things, neutral things. And I think that going back to what you said about being at that age and being lucky to have beautiful, wonderful girlfriends and friends and you're around you talking about sex, I was the same way, except I also was front loaded by the fact that I had a very Catholic mother, but who was also she was a scientist. Mm-hmm. And she was very progressive. And this woman went to church 3 times a week, but she also said science first. And they don't mix, right? And that was my mother's values, but she was she'll say this today. She says, I wasn't pro-sex, but I was pro my child's sexual development.
Oh, wow.
So she was very clear. You need to know your body. You need to understand what feels good, what doesn't feel good. If something doesn't feel good, tell me. We'll go to the doctor. That was the experience growing up. But she was like, don't have sex until marriage because we're Catholic, right? So it's like, wait a minute. but it was. I'm so lucky. I was so lucky to have her as a parent, and my dad, who kind of was passive, but he went with it, right? So he's like, sure, yes, honey, that's basically what it was. But I think that those foundations are good. And sometimes if you don't get it from your family that's raised you, you can have the other family that raised you, your friends. And so that's also interesting. It can be a curse, and it can also be a blessing at the same time, depending on what you're surrounded with.
Right. Yeah. And it's so funny that your parents weren't pro-sex or what did you say? Pro-sexual development.
Yeah.
So my parents were not pro is what I say. 'Cause I was raised in Catholic school, and it was they made me sign some contracts. I broken before I even signed it. If you don't know what normal looks like, look at your vulva, look at your vagina. If something feels weird, you go into the doctor. If you don't think the doctor is listening to you, I will come in as soon as you want me to. We will you, and so all your parts, vocalize all this stuff, but also it was dear God, don't have sex,
Right.
Or let alone talking about the pleasure aspect of it. It's very, very interesting how, at least for me, and it sounds like for you, it built this foundation of well, I have the words to describe it, and I know what's going on there. So then, yeah, so it's interesting to me, and I feel with this whole movement, with everything that's going on with Black Lives Matter, with all of the research coming out about, people of color having such death rates and complications with pregnancy, it's taking these young people and educating them about this stuff, feel empowered to talk to their providers, and advocate for themselves, whether it's their provider, whatever, so that they, like you said, pleasure you. What is your value around sex? I'm not saying it would end all of this, but I know if I was able to answer that stuff going into college, I probably would have had some the random sexual experiences I had. Granted, they were bad, but like we would, like you said, had a different experience around it. And so, yeah, I think that's so fascinating. And I think social media is a really great way to tap into a crowd of people.
I agree. I think that, Laura, it's so interesting because, we're healthcare providers, right? And so people forget that we're human beings in the sense of like individual beings. And like when we talk about implicit bias from a racial aspect, like when I lecture to the med students, I'm like, yes, we talk about that, but we also talk about implicit bias when it comes to sex. When it comes to, and we have to think about, someone asked me one time, they're like, UC, why do you talk about race and politics and all the things on a platform that talks about sex? And I'm like, because it informs sex. It informs how you learn about sex. It informs how you express it, how you receive it, all of the things. Yes. Right? For me to not talk about it, it's almost ridiculous. Right. Because and the thing is, I always talk about the isms. It can be sexism. It can be racism. It can be homophobia, right? It can be ethnocentrism. Like all of those are very, very real. And I think if we ignore that, we ignore all of the components that influence ways in which we understand how we develop as people, and not having that understanding and not having that permission or giving ourselves this permission impacts how we deal with sex.
Yes. And,
it never ceases to amaze me because I did have you're right. I kind of had like a weird path, like not weird, but just like a unique path. And I'm still learning. I don't know much. I tell people I know what I know, but like there's so much that I would like to learn. And I think that I'm always in the school of learning when it comes to sex. I'm always in the school of learning when it comes to race and racism, like creating that course. I knew what I knew. I knew what I was lecturing on for years and what I would go to conferences and speak on. But like deep diving and really, really kind of following my instincts and saying, we need to talk about this. We need to talk about, and I'm like, man, I didn't know that piece. I knew there was something going on there. And I was like, nope, that's racist. But I didn't, and kind of really deep diving, it kind of reinvigorated my understanding and energy. Because when I thought about the commitment to learn about sexual health, I devoured all of everything that came my way, right? I wanted to learn. And it wasn't because I needed to be the only one who knew in the room. It's like, no, the point of me learning this is so everyone can know what I know.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that, again, I really enjoy your platform. And one why I myself, because I want to make other people, and I include this too, just as knowledgeable as, because you shouldn't have to go get to know the anatomy of your vulva. Like you shouldn't have to go get a secret to be able to receive good care after you have genital reconstruction surgery. Like that should be God-given human right. Everyone should be able to get that. And so I tell people all of the things, and that way they can have that same access, and it can be in like outs. Sometimes, as reading all of the things, it's like some of those research articles and some about telling stuff is like so powerful. We've gone to so much school to read that. How is the average person going to have time to understand those numbers and everything? I'm trying to make you just as knowledgeable, so then you can feel empowered, because it's just incredible to me. I'm very one thing, like I give me physical therapy. If I have to measure something in a picture, I'm done.
Yeah.
Anything with my car, I'm screwed. thing that is not physical. So I just imagine like hearing painful things, whether it's intercourse, whether it's you're feeling upset with your partner, you can't communicate about libido or stuff, whether you're a young person, you know what's going on with your body, why you're feeling a certain way. I just would feel, I can't imagine that. And then let alone when you add, like you said, these other and what media pushes, like oofta. So yeah, so I think it's so cool that you're sharing that stuff, and like that you're constantly doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, listen, talking about sex is uncomfortable because it's not talked about at the consistency that we talk about everything else.
Right.
And I think a lot of times people, they always ask me, well, like, what do you do with someone who's like really conservative? And I said those people are coming to me because they're having sexual problems.
Yes.
And so, I always kind of meet people where they're at, and they say, well, tell me what your boundaries are. I'm going to ask you these questions, but I don't want to disrespect you. And you tell me what your boundaries are, what the limits are, and we kind of can work within that, and the thing is, people can find pleasure in any context, in any situation. Sometimes we just have to be kind of a little bit more fluid, a little bit more flexible in how we approach that person, and also kind of affirming their experience and their life, right, and their culture. And, because being Baptist is a culture, right? Yeah. Being Catholic is a whole culture, right? Being Muslim, being Jewish is a culture, being Black, being light-skinned, being dark-skinned, like all of these things, being queer. I think that, people are like, well, how do you know so much? It's like, I actually don't. I've fallen on my face many, many times. I've made mistakes. I've been told about myself so many times. And like Brene Brown says, she's like, what does she say? She said, it's like, it's not about, I'm not here to be right. I'm here to get it right.
Yes. Yep.
And so if I'm here to get it right, I'm fine with falling on my face, as long as it means that the end result is that my patient or client has really good care.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I cannot tell you how I'm so appreciative to all your folks and all the who are so kind to me, who are so kind to me, because that I'm extremely passionate about. It's my favorite group of humans to work with, and it not for true kindness and understanding of them being share with me. I tell you what, I would not where I'm at today with all of the learning that I love that people who are willing to take the time to say something to you when you're incorrect or wrong. Then I would also say it is challenging. I've tried really hard to continue to do the work, to like learn as you like all of the stuff. I'm sure lots of people reached out and asked questions of you, and I would people take the time to, like, we do have the wide web to be able to Google things, Google what's going on, as far as like, especially how better for all of the people are in outlier. So yeah, it's been, the pandemic really has like like you said, you've like really gotten more. I know I've had to like shift about how to do business differently, which has been really weird. But it's just really up our society. I know there's a lot of not great that happen. I wish would happen, but I'm hoping all that our country needed to shift some focus.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, it's really funny, and it's funny how it changes. I think what this has exposed is like how different states are run differently, and different things are, different cultures are adopted, and how that works, especially in the world of now telemedicine, which has been on the discussion for years. Years, people have been talking about telemedicine, but it seems so kind of, and then we were literally, everyone was forced into that space. It's like, how do we do this? I'm very happy for anyone who had stock in Zoom, but prior to this, but I think especially when you're talking about the sexual health space, I've been seeing a lot of creativity, a lot of dynamic creation, especially on social media. But I always tell people that social media is like a brilliant marketing tool, but it's also a brilliant education tool to a point, right? I think it can be really overwhelming, and it can be really hard because, there's a lot of posts about not comparing yourself. And I think that that's the very thing, is that, especially when it comes to sexual issues, we compare. And we have a lot of distress in that comparison. And it's I think that's something that even in my 10 years of being a PT, that I have always kind of struggled with, is like kind of that distress with people comparing themselves and saying, well, my girlfriend, my friend, has, toe curling orgasms and no pain with sex, and she loves it. And I don't even have kids. I don't have that stress that other people have. And I don't enjoy sex the way that I should. And I'm like, okay, how should you enjoy sex?
Right. Mm-hmm.
How, and I think that that's kind of one of those things where it's, and that's why I always tell people that it's so important to have like a multidisciplinary, like pelvic health dream team, where you have a yoga instructor, a Reiki person, an herbalist, you have a chiropractor, you have an acupuncturist, you have mental health, you have a surgeon, you have like all of those people, depending on what's going on, are essential to kind of addressing your sexual and pelvic health, depending on what's going on.
Yes. So now you currently work in a multidisciplinary team.
Yes, so I'm at Dell Medical School at UT Health Austin, and so I currently work at the Women's Health Institute, and we are multidisciplinary practice. So in-house we have nutrition, licensed clinical social work, so she does just talk therapy, particularly anxiety and sex therapy and trauma and things like that. We have generalists, general OB-GYN, psychiatry. We have a vulvar dermatologist. We have nurse practitioners, PhD level, and master's level. We have PA, we have MAs, we have physical therapy, all in the same clinical space. So when you come in to see us, you're going to actually see what we call an advanced level practitioner. So not necessarily MD first, you're going to see the PA and the NP, and then depending on what pathway we design, you might go see the MD for surgical consult, or you're going to see myself or my colleagues in kind of a grouped setting. So it's like, oh, okay, you have some severe anxiety, or there's some issues in terms of trauma, or you're just stressed and you need someone to talk to. We're going to set you up with the clinical social worker, but also we're going to set you up with UC, and we're also going to have you consult with a nutritionist because you're struggling with constipation and all of those things. So then they get that appointment, and so they see all of us, and we all kind of communicate. So it's very, I love it because it's just a dream way to practice.
Yeah, I think that's nice because you hold that really huge experience, because with anything, it is multi. You need
Yeah.
multiple team members to fix and address the problem. And I think how many individuals I've encountered via social media where, oh, I'm just seeing a and they told me I don't need and they just told me I need surgery to fix it. It's not fixed. You know?
Yeah.
So I love that you space that has that team together. So needed.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like we, yeah, I agree. And the thing is, the research says time and time again, a multidisciplinary approach is the best approach with anyone with pelvic floor dysfunction, right?
Yeah.
So that's urinary incontinence, sexual dysfunction, you name it, fecal incontinence, all of the things,
Yes.
right? So it's not just a matter of, you know, having all these cool people around. It's like, this is the best way to get your care managed, period.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, to anyone listening to this, make sure you're going to get care, that you have a multidisciplinary team on board. If you don't have a multidisciplinary team on board, for instance, when patients come see me, we make sure to sign all this information and provider, whether they're your physical therapist or the other members of the team, should be very open, talking and discussing with the other people. If they are not, that might not be the and find someone new, because there's other fish in the sea, as my mom said. So I think that that's a huge thing. I've been with this person forever, I have to be there. Or the PT said they're the only person. Nope. Different things. There's certain people I've with, and it's not their fault. It's not my fault. But we were able to find someone better. So always having that open communication is best. And then, like you see with disciplinary, always evidence.
Absolutely.
And so, okay, so you are a faculty member in 2 different places, plus you patients, plus you have your own firm. Girl, how do you stay around? This is like also one of my, I feel like, yeah, like so way for me to like talk to women entrepreneurs and be like, how in the heck are you insane? Are you right now?
So that's a great question. I think, so I don't want to blame it on me being a Nigerian. Like, because we're crazy. Nigerians are nuts. Especially, I'm Igbo, right? So I'm part of the Igbo tribe, so we're like extra special. You know, I'm that's not my strength. But I do, like, the thing is, I think it's not my strength, but I do schedule time. It's just that COVID really disrupted my, you know, I scheduled 3 weeks off in like out of the country, and the, you know, and because I do that every year, 3 weeks every year, I'm out of the US, and I couldn't do that this year. And traveling was quirky because I didn't want to travel and expose my patients to germs, and so I had to contain myself. So I think this year has been really interesting in that, you know, I haven't been able to take that big mental break that I truly need, which I can feel. But I also know, you know, I have to be really creative about, okay, now that we have better testing protocols in place, you know, I can get tested, you know, before I'm going to probably road trip somewhere, you know, and like, because the thing is, I still have to be responsible. I don't want to, like, you know, or I could fly and go somewhere and test and all those things, you know, it's really hard to kind of make that plan. I mean, for me, ideally, like, I like to get out of the country, but, you know, I think I'm going to explore the U.S. I'm going to check out some national parks. Yeah. So I think it's forcing me to be more creative. Yeah. And I think also, you're right, it's almost like looking at being an entrepreneur, because I didn't think I really thought of myself as that until the beginning of this year, and how much work it is to kind of do all of the things, and you can't do everything well. And so really kind of centering myself and figuring out to get help, you know, I think is important, and figuring out what that looks like. And, you know, my sister is all about lists, and she's my sounding board. And she's like, you need to make a list about what you can unload. I'm like, okay. So I think, and I firmly believe you can't do stuff like this by yourself.
Right.
And having that understanding, and like understand how to ask for help, and like and not just how to ask for help, but like what you need help with, and being clear about that is really important. And I think that also translates to sex. It's like, you know, why, you know, this bothers you, you know, why is this distressing to you?
Right.
They're like, oh, I have a prolapse. I'm like, no, but why is it distressing to you? Because you have some women with a pelvic organ prolapse that's coming out of their vagina.
Yes.
And they're fine.
Yep.
And you have some women where it's like you can barely see it, and they're just so upset. Both feelings are valid. It's just like, why is this bothersome to you? What is making this distressing to you? And that's where the intervention has to happen. Not just at the prolapse, but what is the constructs that are just making this distressing to you?
Right. Isn't it so apply what we do to our patients to ourselves with things? I had one patient that's like, Laura, you know, stories, you are always talking about relax, yet anything you share is all about you not anything. Like, you never share on your story anything relaxing. You're always sharing on stories you're doing, and so you actually relax. And I was like, you are correct.
Yeah.
You caught me. Hey.
Right.
So I love why is this distressing with you? Yeah, distressing with you. And yes, formulating around that for this health thing. And we've offered so many pearls of information for patients throughout, which I love, and also so many pearls for myself. I loved all of the questions that you said and offered, said for yourself, like with travel. Like, I do right now, and I was really worried about traveling because being patients, all of that. I told my patients where I'm going, asked when I come back, do you want to put a pause on it for a couple of weeks? All, you know, wear the mask. They were like way less stressed about it.
Right.
Want to keep you safe. In San Francisco, anytime I get totally close to someone, I've like got my mask on. Like, my glasses will be like falling down my face, like all, you know, and yet my patients are like not at all worried. And so I don't know if that's good or bad, but they were like, you need a vacation. And I'm like, okay, I see you for like 45 minutes. What kind of energy am I giving you here? So when you were talking about the 3 weeks of travel, I totally, let alone getting out of the country every single year, I feel you. Like,
yes.
Like I said, because you got like so many things. So you were messaging, and I'm on. I'm like, she's messaging. It's not. Like, why is she so quick?
I was finishing a grant. I told you, I was like, oh my God, my crazy self. I was working on a grant application. And so, like, it's nuts. And that's why I like getting out of the country, because I literally can't. I can't check stuff. I can't check, because I the one self-care thing I have is I don't have my work email on my phone. don't tell anybody, as I'm like on Instagram Live. I refuse. I'm like, sorry, no, I don't do that. But I don't like, so when I'm out of the country, I'm like, it's harder for me to do all the things.
Yes.
And it forces me out of that realm, and I just drink that in. So I can't wait until I go on I'm going to go with the Big Sur in a couple of weeks with two of my really good friends, for like 4 or 5 days. And, you know, I'm not a naturey person, but I'm going to hike, you know, I'm going to drink some wine, and I'm going to hang out by the ocean because I'm a water baby. I love the ocean. So.
That's you'll have but yes, you were messaging. I'm calling you out right now. You were messaging me. Finishing a great, but God, I thought I was bad. My boyfriend is in the clinic, and he started a job and would have more time, and he's like, "You haven't out, like leave me alone." And he's and I just brings water, and he's like, "Have you brushed your teeth yet?" And I'm just like, I'm like, oh, I'm going to brush my teeth, fine, you know. And so it's really hard to unplug, especially when you're passionate about something. So I had to laugh. I did. I was like, I'm interviewing you. And I was like, it was the website that I showed you, like, a year ago, figure out what to do with my blog, and like, it was 2 a.m. CST, and she was still up writing a grant. And he was like, you can't compare yourself to other people that are in your profession.
Other crazy people in your profession. Crazy people.
Yeah,
right?
Like, you can't do the example of the person that you were copying because I know she's going to be like you. And I was like, well, I found my crew then. So yeah, felt like very, like, I was like, yeah. And my friend who I have, like, have you slept? Like, and I say, I still on, get up, and I'm like, it's fine. It'll work. Just crazy. It'll work.
It's fine.
So appreciated that.
Yes. No. I need to be checked. I love that you called me out. Please call me out. Everyone calls me out, and I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
I keep telling my boyfriend is, and I've told him that we've been together for 4 years, and like, I need to stop calling it a season. It's not a season. And I'm like, I meant life. You are just programmed. He goes, I don't care. 30, 35, 40, 40, 70. He's like, I like this. I see this very wise woman with like long flowing hair, tattoos all over the, you know, so sex positive, amazing. She's gonna be chill, smell like patchouli oil. And he's like, no.
Not at all.
Cool, but in like me like closer to when I'm like an octogenarian or whatever. So yeah, I want to just say thank you so much for letting me interview you and giving all of these pearls of information. I'm going to say Instagram for anyone now. I also download them on my YouTube channel.
Awesome.
Already, if you want to know, because like I said, there's pearls of knowledge in here, and I really appreciate it. Like, I have been a stalker for a long time. And are you a Wallace faculty?
I'm actually not on any faculty, and that's actually intentional.
Okay.
Because I just like to be like a free bird.
So, but you are faculty on other places, and I do want to take the University of Michigan course talking about. So maybe sometime I can email you that.
Call me anytime. Call me anytime.
Course for the gender diverse population for Herman and Wyatt. So I'm really excited that out thing to come join. You're back.
Awesome. No, that'd be great. And just a quick plug. So the Fenway Community Health Center.
Yes.
Fenway Health in Boston is part of Harvard University. That's where I did their conference on transgender and non-binary health a few years ago, and they do it every year, and it's excellent. So if you ever want to go, it's super, super affordable, and it's just a wealth of knowledge. So, and they have a lot of free online education as well. That's also great.
Look that up. I'm supposed to be building. I was trying to like keep my sanity and them, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I think starting my own business in a pandemic was going to be that difficult.
Yeah,
fine. And they're like, my dad always says, we're going to both ends. And I said, candle has been lit ablaze.
Right.
So I will definitely check that out. Thank you for all of your information. So amazing. Please go give UC a follow. Her website, uclogic.com, is so amazing. And yes, thank you. And
thank you. Bye. It's great to chat with you. You're the best.
yes, bye.
Bye.